Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. Look, if you're like me, you saw this headline from the Toronto Star and you got pretty excited. It suggests that 58% of Canadians have a favorable view of socialism, which is fantastic because you guys know me. I'm a socialist. I believe that it's the best path forward for the country and that it's great to see other Canadians agree with me. But the data inside the article is a bit more complicated, and I wanted to explore some of that and the consequences of what we're seeing. So as the piece does note, that the headline isn't wrong. A majority of Canadians, about 58, so about 60% of Canadians, have a favorable view of socialism, and about 40% do not. If you're a New Democrat or you're relatively lower income, you are more likely to be a socialist or more likely to have a positive view of socialism. And if you're wealthier, if you're from places like Alberta, if you're a conservative supporter, you're more likely to be against socialism. None of that is that surprising. But this same poll from Forum, polling about 1,700 people, asked the same question about capitalism. And they got the exact same result. It's really eerie almost. They asked the same question. What are your views on capitalism? And there, 58% of people suggested that they support capitalism. They have a favorable view of it, and about 40% did not. So on both socialism and capitalism, about 60% of Canadians support it, and 40% don't. That seems weird to me because you would think that in some ways those ideologies are mirror opposites. You know, if you're a socialist, you're not a capitalist. If you're a capitalist, you're not a socialist. But I think this goes to show that the average Canadian doesn't necessarily think too deeply of these broad ideological questions, at least not day to day, and that they have an understanding of both capitalism and socialism that is different than what you might find in a deep dive academic study or in YouTube videos like my own. And so for a lot of people, I think when they hear socialism, they think of social programs. They think of universal healthcare. They think of free education or cheap education. They think of unemployment insurance. They think of all the sorts of things that are social safety nets, that build greater equality between citizens. And those things are part of socialism, but as we've explored on this channel, socialism is not just social programs. Socialism is, the building of an economic democracy. Public ownership, worker ownership, cooperative ownership of major industry, of, industrial workplaces and what have you. And that's required for a socialist society. I mean, we talked about this on my recent appearance on David Dole's channel. This is the misunderstanding of socialism. Conversely, I think a lot of people, when they hear capitalism, they think of things like free trade or free markets or opportunity or, freedom from government intervention, which a lot of people support. When, as we know, that's not really capitalism. In my previous video today, I noted that capitalism in no way requires democracy or free markets or liberty. Capitalism is about private property and the exploitation of workers by the holders of that private property. And so, in both of these cases, I feel like people are taking a generalized view of what capitalism and what socialism is. So where does that leave us, though? A lot of people read the headline, shared the article, and suggested, well, this is a clear indication that Canada can move in a socialist direction. I don't know if that's 100% the case based on this, because, again, just as many people support capitalism. But what it does show is that the word socialism is not a taboo in Canada. The piece notes that socialism is more popular in Canada than it is in the United States, for instance. That in that country, socialism amongst young people is growing in popularity, but on the whole, people have a negative view of it. Not so in Canada. There is room for politicians, and I've noted this and many others have noted this, in the NDP to take a bolder stand on the questions of democratic socialism, but also to use the language more frequently and more directly. And I think this shows that at least among the broad progressive electorate, 60% of Canadians, they wouldn't mind hearing that. They wouldn't mind hearing the word socialism every now and then. Now, they might not agree with my definition of socialism, but the broad idea of what socialism means to them, like in their hearts, is positive. But it also shows that the left has work to do. That the current conception of socialism, from my perspective, if it's seen as popular by many of the same people who like capitalism, is probably inaccurate. and that we have to go to the public and speak to them about how capitalism doesn't imbue the positive characteristics they bestow to it, but that socialism is about more than what we currently envision it as. That the problems of capitalism are solved not just by social programs and, universal guarantees of human dignity, as important as that is, but by really talking about the core flaws of economic concentration of power. And that will be challenging because I think as we get more ideologically combative, people will become more torn on the question of socialism. If we go to somebody today and say socialism is healthcare and education and dental care and childcare, it's no surprise to me that 60% of Canadians would like that and that only 40% would disapprove. That's no surprise to me at all. It's basically most conservatives and right-wing liberals oppose it and everybody else likes it. That's where I would guess. But if we go to people today and say socialism is the collective through worker, state, and cooperative means, the ownership of industry, you would probably not get 60-40 splits. Maybe it's 50-50, I'm not sure, but it's more combative. And I think the left needs to introduce these concepts because as long as socialism is only seen as social programs, we're not actually going to really be moving that Overton window too far to the left. So, I'm happy about this poll. I'm happy about the results. I don't like to see that capitalism is just as popular as socialism, but I do like to see that socialism is an acceptable term for 60% of Canadians, including about a quarter of conservatives, according to this poll. That's not nothing. But we need to do more to build, a class consciousness in this country, to build a sense about what socialism is really and can be. And until we do that, this is just a nice little anecdote, and I think we need to do a lot more to build from it. Because let's be real, with socialism polling at 58-40, that's great, but capitalism polling at 58-40, that's not great. And that means that there are a ton of people, just as many, who have a positive view about an exploitative, unjust, unequal system of economic and social production. And that means the left has a lot of work to do, because it's not just enough to suggest that, the NDP use the S word a little bit more. It's really about how are we going to challenge this mythology within the average Canadian that capitalism is good. And I think we need to do that. And the NDP just saying socialism more isn't enough. We have to go at capitalism, both through our political parties, but also through the discourse. And I don't see us really doing that sufficiently right now. The left isn't doing it. Labor isn't doing it. I don't know who's doing it beyond isolated pockets of people, like, people on YouTube, individual podcasters, individual writers. There's no mass movement to denounce capitalism. Until we see that, we're going to be stuck in this mire. And I want to get out of it so we can do the real work of building a socialist society here in Canada.